This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze. And Avoid the Maze is about a journey. And today I have John Templeman with me, and he is from my own hometown, Cleveland, Ohio. And he is the founder of Jibmachine record label. Now, John, when I was growing up, there were, certain record labels that we all knew. Mm-hmm. And today, there are just so many more, and many of them are very local. And so sometimes we don't know anything about them. So give us a little bit of background, who you are and how did you create a record label?
Good question. Well, Jibmachine is 18 years old this month. Actually created the record label by accident. I was in a couple of bands that both broke up, I would say sooner than they should have. After the last band that I was in that had broken up, I went back to the drawing, took some time off from music, a few months, was writing songs, but I wasn't really super active with it. And I went to, a friend of mine was living in New York at the time. So I went there, he had a little studio. I recorded some demos with him and decided I was going to put these demos out in addition to some other songs I had recorded that were just, lying around. And so to do that, I started Jibmachine Records. And the first release were these recordings plus copies of CDs from the two failed bands. And that's kind of how it started. Shortly after starting the label, I ended up jamming with a couple friends of mine, and I started a band called Hot Ham and Cheese, which I was in for many years, almost 15 years. But when Hot Ham and Cheese started playing out in the clubs, this was probably around 2005, I'd say. When Hot Ham and Cheese started playing out in the clubs, we would play with other bands, and they were like, "Oh, we'd like to be on your label." The first band then I signed that I wasn't in or didn't have anything to do with was a band called Johnny Mohawk and the Assassins. And shortly after that, I signed the Hostile Amish, who are they've been in Cleveland for over 30 years. They're still on the label today. And it just kind of went from there. And now, actually, we have a new website that's launching on Friday. That is not an April Fool's joke. It actually is launching on Friday. And I was just looking at it yesterday, and there's around 20 active artists currently signed to the label right now. So it's been an interesting journey. I'm still very active with music myself. I just put out a solo album last month, currently promoting a video for what is the second single from the album, and, just doing my thing.
Well, like I started out saying, when I was growing up, even though there were garage bands, most of the production happened in studios, and those studios usually were New York, LA, maybe Motown, maybe in Tennessee, but it wasn't necessarily here in Cleveland, Ohio, even though this is the home of rock and roll.
You're right.
So that has changed over the years, obviously. So when you are bringing on a band to be on your label, do you go seeking them out, or are they seeking you out?
Believe it or not, it's usually from referrals or people that I know through networking. I'll give you an example. There's a friend of mine who owns a couple of labels in DC. I've known him for years. He's a college radio disc jockey. He's been playing Jibmachine stuff since we started, basically. I don't even know how he found us, but he's been playing Jib stuff since like 2005.
Sure.
A couple of years ago, we started talking more frequently and started doing business together. Jibmachine actually distributes some of his label's titles. And through him, I met the Nihilistics, who are one of the original hardcore punk bands out of New York City. They started in the late 70s. They were a CBGB's band. Used to play with the Dead Boys and Bad Brains and the Beastie Boys when the Beastie Boys were a punk band. Um, and then from being friends with the Nihilistics and then signing them, and Jib has been reissuing a lot of their back catalog stuff. And hopefully sometime, I don't think this year, but sometime next year, hopefully they'll have a brand new release, new material. But they introduced me to a band that they know from New Jersey called W70, and Jib just signed them. Had a similar experience with Slam and Gladys, who's on the label. They were based in LA many years ago. I'm good friends with the lead singer. I wanted to reissue their one and only release, or now they have two, but how that came about was we went out to LA, the original band reunited, and they were just going to record a couple of bonus tracks for this reissue, ended up recording a whole nother album, and that sent us down a completely different journey. And then JJ Ferris is the guitar player in Slam and Gladys. He also produced the record. Through working with JJ on the Slam and Gladys album, we're now involved in a couple other projects together. He's producing an artist from Australia called Cleo Alexandra, who her stuff will be coming out later this year. And he's also in a band called Red 37. And hopefully that album will come out at some point. That band actually also features Matthew Nelson from the Nelson Twins, and from Nelson.
You know, and what I love that I've learned over the last couple of years since I've been doing these type of podcasts is that the music industry is really a very supportive group of individuals. And for those of us on the outside looking in, you know, I wouldn't have known that. You know, it appeared that, you know, every artist was out there for themselves. And I'm sure there are a few that are like that.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, I've noticed, and especially working with artists here in the Cleveland area and upstate New York, it's like, you know, you can tap somebody on the shoulder and say, hey, I need your advice. Or, hey, can I play with you? Or will you sit down and help me figure something out? My son, who has been a performer since grade school, he's had this real urge to sit and write music. And he writes lyrics, and then he thinks of the sound in his head. And then he either calls a musician friend or his uncle, who's a producer, and says, okay, it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. What can you do? And it's surprising how people just come out of the woodwork and say, hey, I'll work with you. So what is different about this community than most other businesses? Because it seems like you're all a bunch of angels, and I love it.
I don't know about that, but I just think it's, for me personally, I can't speak for other people, but I can speak for me. I just like collaborating I love creating music. So, you know, when you collaborate with different people, the music's different. A very good friend of mine who we have a project called Gwazi, and I've been recording with him since 2005. His name is Brandon Youngs. He has a studio in Parma. He's a professional engineer. Brandon and I have done so many projects together. If it's Gwazi, it's one way, but then he records a lot of my solo stuff. He used to produce Hot Ham and Cheese. We've collaborated with other artists on their projects. It's just, you know, it's just creating art. And when you bring different people to the fold, obviously there's a different sound or a different type of music. You know, I just try to record as much as I can. That's really where I'm at now. Hot Ham and Cheese ironically went on an indefinite hiatus, as we called it. Played our last show in November of 2019, was completely planned. We had no idea what was about to happen a few months later. It was almost like we had this sense of, let's just end it now. We wrapped it up with a nice little bow, left the door open for something in the future. But I don't see that happening, you know, anytime soon. But you know, I lost my train of thought.
That's okay.
Sorry. But you know, it's, since then I've been just, you know, writing a lot of music. That's kind of what kept me sane during the pandemic, was working on this album that I just came out with called America or Bust. Also worked on some new Gwazi stuff and some other projects. It's just, you know, I try to record as much as possible. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. Since Hot Ham and Cheese pretty much ended, I've been more focused on studio. I really, at this point in my life, I mean, playing live is amazing and it's a different type of energy and a different approach, but I really don't have the desire to play live as much anymore. It's more just creating and producing other people, you know, having other people, helping other people create too. I've always enjoyed the studio process more. I mean, there's nothing like playing a live show and the crowd's into it, but overall, the creation process is you know, that's where it's at for me.
I love it. But question for you, because I find this very fascinating with so many different groups. You come up with these names, Hot Ham and Cheese. Why?
You know what? The drummer Robbie, he and I had been friends for about 10 years. Knew he played drums, but we never jammed together. And a friend of ours, Reggie, was like, this is when I was doing that solo acoustic stuff. And then I had some heavier songs and said, you should get Robbie and jam some of these heavier songs, because maybe you could start doing shows where you play, you know, an acoustic set, then you play a heavy set. I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. You know, so Robbie and I got together one afternoon and we jammed together for like 5 hours, wrote a couple songs. And at the end of that, it's like, okay, let's just start a new band. And he doesn't remember saying this, but I completely remember it plain as day. We were in his kitchen and he said, I always wanted to be in a band called Hot Ham and Cheese. Why he said that, I have no idea. And I said, okay, we'll just call the band Hot Ham and Cheese. And that's literally how it started. He does not remember saying that. To this day, he jokes about it. He goes, I don't even remember that, but that's how it went down, because I didn't think of it. And I had no idea we were going to be a band for 15 years and release. Yeah, I think we had four albums we released other albums. We had 4 albums of original material. We toured a lot regionally. We toured the United States. I had no idea that was, you know, going to be our band name. It's like Dave Grohl once said, you know, if I would have known my band was going to be what it became, I wouldn't have called it Foo Fighters. I would have called it something else, you know. And it's kind of, Hot Ham and Cheese was very much the same way. Like, no, we were going to be, but people liked that name and they remembered it, you know, which was interesting. And when you hear that, it's kind of silly. And we were pretty heavy. We started out, we were hardcore punk and metal. By the time our last album came around, we got a little better as musicians and we were almost progressive rock, I would say, by the end. But you know, we were just a punk band essentially, you know. So it was a silly name for that, I guess.
I'm glad that you explained it that way, because I have a feeling a lot of names come about like that. And I just find it fascinating, you know, like Foo Fighters, like why, you know, but, you know, everybody remembers it, you know, even if you don't listen to their music, you know who they are because of their name. So,
well, that's pretty evident by what, you know, with Taylor Hawkins passing away, it's pretty evident, like how many people are mourning that, even though they, you know, never met him personally, because that music is really, it's been the soundtrack of a lot of people's lives, mine included. And I'm a huge Foo Fighters fan. I actually was just telling someone, I saw them at the Cleveland Agora in 1995, 2 months before their first album came out. No one knew any of the music. They just knew it was the drummer from Nirvana's band, you know? So I've literally been listening to the Foo Fighters their whole existence. And it's, you know, people, they connect with that, and, you know, they connect with those songs. And when, you know, something happens tragically like this, it affects you.
Exactly.
You know? The power of music. It's the power of music. It really is.
Well, and, you know, I didn't realize how much music affected me in my life. I always enjoyed it. My parents always had, you know, record albums around the house and we would play them. And then I have 2 brothers. Only one is musical, but he would pick up an instrument and automatically play it. And I was always envious because in grade school, I tried to play the clarinet, and I was told by the music teacher to pretend I was playing the clarinet. So, you know,
I was in a
didn't.
band. I was in a band. I'm not going to say his name. I don't want to embarrass him, but one of my bandmates, we did original songs, but we were a cover band mainly. And you'd play shows, you'd play 3 sets. And by the 3rd set, he'd usually be so drunk that we would tell the sound guy, like, turn him out of the main. So he would hear the monitors and hear himself, but the main speakers would not be projecting his keyboards or his vocals, because he was usually so hammered by that point and would always be screwing up. But just turn him out of the mains.
I love it. I love it. So you learn how to work around those things.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So you mentioned the Agora, and the Agora used to be a main stage in Cleveland, Ohio. And I know they're trying to come back as, a main stage. Where are some of the places that, you really love to play in this city? Because we've got a lot of places and most people don't even know they exist.
I love the Agora. We've played in the ballroom a lot back in the day. I love what they did to it. They spent a lot of money renovating it. I've seen some extremely memorable shows there over the years. I do really like the Agora. We used to play the Fantasy a lot when Michelle DeFrasia owned it, and also the Symposium, which was in the basement. We played the Foundry many times. Now That's Class, which is now No Class. Emma Jacquem running it. We played Beachland Ballroom. I mean, we pretty much, and we played in clubs that don't even exist anymore. Probably my favorite place that we used to play, that is now called the Fun House, was the Spitfire. And the Spitfire was a punk club. We used to have friends that would be in bands coming through town, and we would book shows to play with them at the Spitfire. And our friends from the East Coast all said, like, this is how CBGBs used to be. It was like it became like the CBGBs of the Midwest. And then Stosh, the owner, he's a super cool guy. I think he just got tired of running that, and he had something else he wanted to do. And he turned it into what it is today, which is called the Fun House. Sadly, I don't frequent it as much as I should. I'm not I should be a better patron of the Fun House, but it just, the Spitfire was awesome. Had some amazing shows there. When we first started playing there used to be a cage around the stage, and I had a side project with a bunch of friends of mine. It was called the Drug Fucks, and our very first show, a friend of ours rented a Spider-Man costume and dressed up like Spider-Man. And as we were playing, he was crawling and climbing all around the stage.
Wow.
Around the stage. It was pretty interesting. Watching those videos are hilarious. Like, it's so funny, but it's very punk rock. You know what I mean? Like, just this hole in the wall bar, band jamming, and a dude in a Spider-Man costume crawling on the cage. I mean, it's something you never forget.
Well, and it sounds like, there's a creative side, but there's also this wonderful fun side of your music, because it's got to be tough, going before a crowd. You don't know what that crowd is feeling that day.
Yeah.
And, I've seen that numerous times when I come in to interview somebody at a show. And before the show, you sort of hear this mumbling. I don't even know who this act is. I don't know why I'm here. And then maybe, the first song, is performed and people are going, do I like it? Don't I like it? And then maybe before it's even halfway over, people are like really into it.
Yeah.
Or the opposite. And I've seen that. And it's got to be tough for you guys on stage because,
I'll say this.
You need that feedback.
I got to the point, you just have to not care. I mean, ultimately, and this may sound selfish, I play music for me. That's it. It's so I can deal with whatever I'm dealing with. And if other people like that, I think that's awesome. And if they don't, then I really don't care. You know, I mean, like, like, for example, I just came out with this album. I'd love to sell, you know, hundreds of copies of it, but if I don't, then I don't. You know, I had a blast making it. It was basically my solace during the lockdown. It's what I concentrated on to get my mind off of what was going on around me that I had no control over. And, you know, and I think I made, honestly, one of the most honest and solid pieces of art that I could. And that's what matters to me, you know, and if other people like it and it helps them, I think that's great, but I didn't make it for them. I made it for me. Yeah, that may sound selfish, but that's how I've always been, you know.
Well, it's not selfish, because that's how I see many, not many, but all of our podcasts. Okay. I don't accept doing a podcast with somebody unless I feel like, hey, there's going to be a message there that might help me. And if it helps me, there's obviously at least one or two other people listening that are going to get something out of this. And when I was contacted about you, I got excited because my son was getting ready to go to New York to work with his uncle and a couple of musicians on some music that he's been putting together. And his comment was almost the same way. I need to do this for me. I need to prove that I can record this, okay, get it out on an EP. And if people like it, that's great. If people don't like it, well, okay, I at least did it. And my first thought was, you know, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of energy. And he goes, but if I don't do it, it's pent up in me and I'll always be sorry.
Very true. And then, and another thing I always say to people is, well, what else am I going to do? Like sit around and watch TV? You know, what else am I going to do with my time if I'm not creating music? You know, a lot of times people ask me, like, how do you have time to work a full-time job and run a label? And that's the answer is, I don't waste time. I mean, very little, I waste very little time. I do sit around and watch TV in the evening, you know, but I'm not like one of these people that usually sadly, when I'm watching TV, I'm watching like old reruns of Love Boat and Three's Company. I'm not like binge watching the latest thing on Netflix and this, like, that's too much. That's too much of a time investment. Like if I'm doing that, then I'm not writing and recording. Like, so to sit around and mindlessly watch an episode of an old show that I've seen 100 times, it just gives me comfort, and it's decompressing when I'm just kind of chilling on the couch anyway, you know, after dinner, before I go to bed or whatever it may be. But usually when it's, you know, during the day or whatnot, I'm trying to utilize my time as much as possible, because I just had a birthday 2 days ago.
Well, happy birthday.
Thank you. And I know that, you know, the older you get, the less time you have, and you never know when your time is going to be up.
Right.
So you might as well take advantage of it the best you can by doing things that you love to do. And for me, things that are meaningful. I mean, whether people listen to it or not, when I'm no longer on this earth, I will have left behind quite a bit of music. Maybe it'll help someone 30 years down the road. I mean, who the hell knows? I mean, you know, but it just, you know, that's kind of the way I look at it, you know, is doing something that you love and that's meaningful with your time.
Well, and I hope our listeners are hearing this loud and clear, because too many people sit around thinking about the things they could be doing and not doing.
Yeah, right.
And, you know, I was a dreamer a good portion of my life, but I would jump into things and say, wait a second, if I don't try this now, I'll never know if I can do it or not.
Right.
And I didn't succeed at everything, but it gave me that opportunity to say, you know what, when I'm gone, if I do remember, because we don't know what happens when we're gone, but if as they're putting me 6 feet under and I go, hey, these are the things I've accomplished. Wow. You know, my life was worthwhile. And that's what I hear that you're saying.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. I mean, you know, as far as we know, we only get one go around here. So you might as well make it count. And, you know, whatever it is that you love, you know, that you're passionate about. And if you don't know what you're passionate about, then put some time and effort into figuring out what your passion is, you know, because you may
Absolutely.
never know. And failure is totally fine. You know what? Failure just, it motivates you to do better the next time. It also is, you know, trial and error, like, oh, okay, I failed. I didn't really like that. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm going to do this instead. You know, it's kind of, there's nothing wrong with that. You know,
Absolutely.
and sometimes I don't like regret any of the music that I've ever put out, because that was the best I could do at the time. You know what I mean? Like, I don't look, you know, you hear some artists, they listen to their stuff that's like 10 years old and go, "Ugh." Well, at the time you thought it was cool and you put out the best you could. And yeah, it's not as good as what you're doing now, but yeah, that's part of, again, the progression, the journey, to getting to, you know, to the best you, I guess, you know, the best version of yourself. And if you're not trying and failing, you're never going to get there, you know.
Exactly. Absolutely. So you have a new album coming out, correct?
It's out.
So it's
It
out.
came out February 25th.
So what's the name of the album so we can all go listen to it?
The name of the album is America or Bust. It is 13 tracks, more on the heavier hard rock side, but it's kind of all over the place. I just read a magazine, an online magazine in Sweden, just reviewed it. I just got that review back a couple of days ago. And the guy that reviewed it got it. He said, you don't know what song's coming next. It sounded like, you know, Templeman had a good time recording this album, which is true. And I wanted to write it so it was almost like you were listening to a random mixtape, you know, like each song, maybe there was kind of a similar thread, but they were different. You know, one song's rock, garage rock, one song's hardcore punk, one's acoustic rock, one's just straightforward hard rock, you know, one's metal, thrash metal. You know, so it came out kind of how I wanted it to. I probably could have trimmed a few songs off and made a more concise EP, but I felt that the whole thing together kind of represented my state of mind during the pandemic. So that's why I released it the way that I did. May have done it differently if it was a different time or whatever, if I was going for a different outcome, but I just figured I'm putting this all out because it makes sense, you know.
And that makes sense. And again, you know, when we're doing something right now, it's based on where we are physically and emotionally.
Yep.
And, you know, I've seen so many, you know, different groups say, you know, we're going to go back and redo this song because that's how we felt then. But you know what? This is how we feel now. And we think we can make it different, better, or, you know, more relevant. And again, I never used to understand that. I would say, well, you made it, you know, don't change it. But it makes sense why that would happen. So
I just finished a project that will probably come out later this year. I took a song from, well, a couple of my solo songs, and then a song from 3 of my past projects, and I recorded them acoustically. So I took these heavier songs, recorded them with drums, acoustic bass, acoustic guitar. So they're all a full instrumentation, but with acoustic instruments. And the way they sound is pretty interesting because a lot of these songs originally were, you know, distorted, heavy guitars and whatnot. And it's so I did 6 tracks, 6 songs, and it just got the final mixes like a week and a half, a couple weeks ago, kind of tweaking those, and then we'll master it. And then I'll probably, like I said, later this year, maybe late summer, early fall, put this out. I think I'm going to call it acoustic punk. So that'll, because that's basically what it is.
I love it. So before we go, I just want to know, you've been in music for a long time. Did you get your start at home? Did you get your start in school? Like, what triggered John to say, hey, this is what I want to do with my life?
I was a little hippie kid. My parents were in a band together.
Okay.
So it was around me from my earliest memories. I remember going to band practice with them and just kind of sitting there in the corner and watching it when I was, you know, 2, 3 years old, and just kind of, I remember my first memories of that are just being enamored by what was going on. And like, I want to do this too. Yeah, I want to, and then they'd let me sing a song, or, at the end of practice, I'd get to sing, or,
Yeah.
play the drums, whatever it was. But it was just something I was always around. And then I kind of took lessons here and there. Like, I took some piano lessons. My dad showed me some things on the guitar. I took drum lessons for a minute, but it wasn't until I was probably later, like high school and college, when I really just started figuring things out. Like, I'm one of those people that can typically pick a guitar up, listen to a song, figure it out, and play it. And and then the more you do that, then you just get better writing your own stuff, because you learn more and you apply that. So or the more music you listen to, you're influenced by different things, then that kind of seeps into your original music as well. So yeah, it's just something that I will say that I'm fortunate, because a lot of people, and we were talking about earlier, a lot of people don't know what they're passionate about, and I've always known. I've never not known. It's just always been there, and it's been my saving grace in life, honestly. I don't think I'd be in a headspace I'm at now if I didn't have music just there for me when I needed it. It's always been there. People could put you, let you down, or situations or circumstances could let you down, but music's always there. So it's, case in point with, like, we've been talking about this album I just made, during the pandemic. It's what I fell back on, so.
Well, and we saw through the pandemic that even though we weren't going out to venues to hear music, okay, there were so many musicians, and it didn't matter what their level of music was, but they were on Facebook, they were on Zoom, they were somewhere, and they were sharing their craft for free, okay? Yeah. And they probably were hurting the most financially than anybody else, because they needed the venues to, put bread and, milk on their table. And so to all those musicians, all I can say is, God bless you for what you did, because there were days that I'd be sitting here in between podcasts thinking to myself, like, what's next? And then I'd be scrolling and I would see a musician who I had no idea who he or she was. And I'd listen, and there'd be something in the music, whether it be the sound, their expressions, or the words, that would just like make me know something about myself. Mm-hmm. And that was important, because, like, we all know we were very, very isolated for the last 2 years.
And I think it's led to a lot of depression, a lot of suicide. That was aside from the whole disease part of it, there were all sorts of very negative side effects that came about from isolating and locking people down. I'm personally one of those people that didn't agree with it, but I guess they made the choices they made, and you live with it. That's what you adjust, you adapt, and that's all you can do. And control, I'm real big on controlling what you can control, and everything that's outside of your control, do not spend a second worrying about it, because all you're doing is causing yourself more strife, because you can't do anything about it. So control what you can control, and then everything else usually falls into place.
So how can our listeners find your music?
Well, you can go on to Spotify and search JTemp13. You could go to, same thing, I have a YouTube channel, JTemp13. You also could go to jibmachinerecords.com. As of Friday, I don't know if the holding page is still up. We're kind of in limbo, testing some stuff out right now. But as of Friday, go to jibmachinerecords.com. You'll be able to see all the bands there. It's got a roster site. There's links to, if you go to jibdigital.com, there's a lot of releases from the label on there. I also have a website, jtemp13.com. You could see a lot of stuff there. Purchase not only the new album, but some of my older stuff. And of course, all in all, major streaming services and download services, the standard things. But it's JTemp13.
Well, we'll put all that in the show notes. So for those of you listening and you said, oh, I didn't catch it, I didn't write it down right, don't worry about it. Just look at the show notes. You'll be able to find John. You'll be able to find all the people that he's working with. And we just want to wish you like the best. Keep in touch. Let us know if you're going to be performing somewhere.
I will.
Especially at one of my favorite spots, and I'm going to give them a shout out, is the Beachland Ballroom.
Yeah.
They're fantastic there. And there's a lot of fantastic places in Cleveland. We do know that.
Yes.
But a lot of people don't. So now it's time to get out and explore.
Yeah. Support local independent music. It's, and I always hear people complain that there's not any good music anymore. Well, yeah, there is. You're just not, you have to look for it because there's so much out there. That's one thing. There is a lot out there. You know, what's the stat? 60,000 songs a day get uploaded to Spotify. That's a lot of music. You know, if we quit making music today, there'd still be plenty for years to come. So, you know, but if, you know, search out, if there's certain genres or whatever, search it out and find those bands in Cleveland and go support them.
Well, I think it's funny because my oldest son manages a number of punk bands. And every time I ask him about them, he says, Mom, you wouldn't like them. You wouldn't like them. And it's like, okay, fine. But then every once in a while, I find out, you know, who one of them is, and I'll go listen to something. And maybe that selection, you know, I didn't like. But then all of a sudden I listen to the next selection and it's like, wow, you know, hey, your mom, you know, she's with it. She likes punk. So I'm just telling people that, you know, just try it. You know, if you don't like it, that's fine. You can't like everything in life, but you might find something that just says, wow, that's something I'm glad I'm listening to.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful day. It's supposed to be in the 70s today in Cleveland, Ohio. Have a great one.
Going from 30 to 70 in a couple hours.
Yep. Have a good day. Bye-bye now.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.